Welcome to Follow Your Curiosity, where we explore the inner workings of the creative process. I'm your host, Nancy Norbeck. Hey there, back with this week's Creative Pep Talk, and I'm going to offer up another short wisdom talk that I did recently after a guest on one of my talks asked me to explain what Kaizen-Muse Creativity Coaching is. It's been a while since I've done that, and there's nothing on the podcast that is specifically on that subject, so I thought that it would be a great thing to share with you because Kaizen-Muse is a little bit different than most forms of coaching, especially life coaching. In fact, it's quite different for reasons that you will shortly hear. So I just wanted to share this with you to give you a better sense of who I am and where I'm coming from as a coach. And, you may find that this is something that you want to explore more for yourself because it works better for certain things and certain people than typical coaching does. So without further ado, here is my wisdom talk about what is Kaizen-Muse Creativity Coaching. I was asked earlier to explain what Kaizen-Muse Creativity Coaching is, and I thought that it would probably be a good idea to come on here and do a short talk that just gets into that so that it's in the list for future reference. So I want to explain to you what Kaizen-Muse means because it does sound like a strange thing if you have never heard of it before. So Kaizen is the Japanese word for continuous improvement through small steps. And it is a word that tends to come up in a business context. As I mentioned in the other talk, Toyota is probably the company that has made it the most famous, though they certainly are not the only ones who use it. And it tends to mean ridiculously small steps. I have an earlier talk where I talked about lowered expectations and small steps and examples of those, because generally when I tell people about small steps, they don't believe me that they're as small as they are. They are smaller than you think. And the reason that they're smaller than you think is because they work. They get around fear and procrastination and whatever, because when you break down things into super small steps, they suddenly become obviously doable. And that's the Kaizen piece of Kaizen-Muse. And we draw on the work of Dr. Robert Maurer and his book, One Small Step Can Change Your Life, The Kaizen Way, for that part of Kaizen-Muse. He's part of our training program for KMCC. The muses are a reimagining of the ancient Greek muses as a set of creativity principles. Jill Badonsky, who came up with this coaching method along with Bob Maurer, has a book called The 9 Modern Day Muses and a Bodyguard. So there were really 10 principles, but the bodyguard is sort of tacked on there as an extra. And the bodyguard is actually one of my favorites because the bodyguard is there to help you deflect criticism from everyone, including yourself. So if somebody just looks at your art project and says, I don't see what's so special about that, rather than internalizing it, you call on your bodyguard and, internally, you can picture it as a character, or you can just picture it as, so what, I'll do it anyway. And that takes care of that criticism not getting past your outside so that you can continue to work without it eating at you. And, the muses involve things like self-talk and intuition, asking questions, standing in your audacity, and other such principles. And the really cool thing about Kaizen-Muse is that it's not like a lot of other coaching methods because it's not focused on, okay, what's your goal? We're going to set this goal and we're going to break it into 5 steps. And I'm going to give you this plan. And every week you'll do these parts of the plan and suddenly you'll be at your goal. Because the creative process is not linear. And in fact, life tends to be less linear than we think it is or than we want it to be. And so it takes that into account, along with the fact that, doubt in our abilities and our work, and if we're even creative at all, is part of the creative process. We usually forget what has worked for us before. We get so stuck in where we are that we can't see anything else. We compare ourselves to others. We get totally hung up on perfectionism, convince ourselves that we're terrible, that we were never meant to be a sculptor, author, actor, dancer, photographer, chef, whatever it is. And we convince ourselves that we, have no business doing anything like that at all. And then we wonder why we can't get started again. Plus, the creative process just takes detours. You think you know where you're going, you feel really confident about it, and then you go to take that step and suddenly nothing happens and you can't figure out why. Kaizen-Muse accounts for all of that. So for instance, if a client comes to me and says, "Hey, Nancy, you know what? I know this is the step that we decided that I was going to take last week, but it didn't work. I didn't do it. And I'm so sorry." My response is not, "Well, what's wrong with you? You fell down on the job and this is ridiculous and you need to get back on the horse and just keep going," because that's not going to work. My response is, "That's okay. Let's talk about it. What happened? What can you tell me about what happened?" And, in addition to all of the other tools and education and awareness that goes into the Kaizen-Muse process, I really believe that actively listening to the client is the biggest gun in my arsenal, for want of a better metaphor, because that's where the magic is. When I can listen to a client and say, "You keep saying that you're stuck because of this, but you've actually mentioned this other thing in passing 3 separate times. Have you noticed that?" It makes them aware of other things that are in their consciousness that they might not have picked up on. And then we can explore, is it really the first thing that you mentioned? Or is it this other thing that keeps coming up? Something in you is trying to tell you something. And that really can help unlock whatever is going on. So it's not, "Teacher, I didn't do my homework." It's something happened. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, let's figure it out. And that, as far as I'm concerned, my intuition, acceptance of what's going on, doing things on the actual call, which I will often do. "Hey, why don't we take 5 minutes and you can make that phone call right now. You can sit down with your canvas and you can start to, sketch something out or, get out your watercolors and do a little bit of work." That kind of stuff we do. But a lot of the time, the magic is in the listening. It's all about the client. It is not about the coach. It's about the coach's ability to hear what the client is saying and help the client hear what they're saying, so you can really figure out what's going on and which tools and awareness and, in-call practice is the thing that's going to get that client rolling again. And that's what I love about it, because it's it's non-directive. It follows the client's flow. And I find that to be so much more powerful. And that's why Kaizen-Muse works really well for people who aren't even convinced that they're creative, who would rebel against, "I'm going to set this goal and you're going to have, 10 weeks. And in that 10 weeks, you're going to do this." A lot of people will run screaming at that. Some people are great with it. More power to them. That's their kind of coaching. But a lot of creative people just can't wrap their heads around it and will rebel against it. A lot of creative people also really get stuck with perfectionism and procrastination and overwhelm. There's a lot of fear in the creative process. You're really putting yourself on the line, especially if you're doing something you've never done before. So they need help in a non-threatening, low-pressure way. And that's why, if you look at my previous talks, there's one in there about lowering expectations, which people misunderstand. And they think that means that you have no standards. Expectations and standards, not the same thing. If you want to know more about that, you'll want to listen to that talk. But, non-threatening and low pressure is the way to get people rolling again, because it takes the fear away. Maybe not all of it, but it takes a lot of it away. It makes a lot of things much more manageable. And that's true
in non-creative pursuits too. People can get really, really hung up on high expectations and pressure, which again, you'll want to go back and listen to that talk if that strikes your fancy and gets your curiosity rolling. So that's just a quick overview of how Kaizen-Muse works and what it is, because it is an unusual term and it's an unusual coaching methodology. So I hope that clears some things up for some folks. I wasn't really planning on opening this up to guests, though if anybody is really curious or has something they want to say, I could do that. But I'll give it a second in case anyone does. But otherwise, that's what I mean when I say I'm a master certified Kaizen-Muse creativity coach. I'm the person who takes all of these tools and puts them to work to help people get unstuck so that they can actually do the creative things that bring them lots of joy, which is why I love doing it. For me, there's really not much on this planet that is better than knowing that, I've just helped someone get back to something they love. Lights me right up.
You can find show notes, the 6 creative beliefs that are screwing you up, and more at fycuriosity.com. I'd also love for you to join the conversation on Instagram. You'll find me at fycuriosity. Follow Your Curiosity is produced by me, Nancy Norbeck, with music by Joseph McDade. If you like Follow Your Curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. It really helps me reach new listeners. See you next time.